When you think of two countries having a bromance, who do you usually think of? Maybe Hungary and Poland getting a little bit frisky, or maybe the thing going on between Turkey and Azerbaijan. But did you know that there used to exist one of the most bizarre country bromances between two of the world's most memeable countries? I'm talking about none other than Romania and North Korea. The Cold War made for some unusual bedfellows, and one of the most peculiar yet little known friendships between comrades was that between Nicolae Ceausescu's communist dystopian Romania and Kim Il-sung's totalitarian dictatorship of North Korea. Ceausescu's rampant censorship, harsh oppression of his people, his dystopian urban architecture, and perhaps most famously of all, the dear leader's flamboyant and lavish personality cult have often drawn comparisons of the worst excesses of North Korea. But what if I were to tell you these similarities weren't by accident and were instead by design, and that in fact Ceausescu and North Korea were once BFFs ready to die for one another? Today we'll delve into one of the most peculiar friendships of the Cold War, the historical bromance between Kim Il-sung's North Korea and Ceausescu's Romania, and the massive yet rarely spoken about influence North Korea had in Ceausescu's reconstruction of the Romanian state. To understand the North Korean influence, we first have to go back to when Ceausescu first came into power, all the way back to 1965. Believe it or not, there was a time when Ceausescu wasn't universally reviled. When he first came to power in 1965, he promised to be a serious reformer and constantly emphasized the importance of Romanian state sovereignty and independence from the Soviet Union. And considering what happened to other countries when they tried to do just that and tried to distance themselves from the Soviet Union, this took some serious stones. Ceausescu even publicly criticized and refused to participate with the other Warsaw Pact countries in the 1968 Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia. And in his early days in office, he also eased press censorship somewhat. Because of such moves, there was a lot of hope in both Romania and the West that he would govern more akin to Joseph Tito of Yugoslavia in a sort of third way of communism, a more liberal and independent strain of political thought that was willing to work with the West and not completely go deranged over some German guy's autistic manifesto. At the time, Romania's relatively relaxed economy was booming, and Ceausescu's bold plan to keep it this way was that Romania should position itself to act as mediator between the two superpowers of the USA and the USSR, able to take advantage of the economic integration opportunities offered by both. So, the West's hope that Romania would resist Moscow's orbit wasn't completely out of the question, and hopes for the country were high. Growing up in Eastern Europe, let's just say I haven't had the greatest childhood. And let's just say that has left me with some issues. I mean, it's obvious just by the profile picture I use, Lamau.
What is that avatar? What is that avatar?
As such, I've been attending therapy on and off for a good chunk of my life. And honestly, having someone listen to me about my daddy issues and having to grow up in a post-socialist hellhole where even the tap water is trying to kill you has been quite helpful. Overall, therapy has been something quite useful for me, also especially when I feel overwhelmed by stress from reaching deadlines and consistently uploading videos onto YouTube. And that's why I can recommend BetterHelp, the sponsor of today's video. BetterHelp is an online service which connects you with a licensed therapist who is trained to listen and give you helpful, unbiased advice. By using my link, betterhelp.com/livingironically in Europe, you can get matched with a professional therapist with years of experience who has been helping people with struggles like yours, usually within 48 hours. All you gotta do is answer a few questions, and after you've been matched, you can start your session from your phone or computer via phone call, video chat, or even messaging, whatever suits your comfort level best. Let BetterHelp connect you to a therapist who can support you, all from the comfort of your own home. Visit betterhelp.com/livingironically in Europe or choose Living Ironically in Europe during sign up and enjoy a special discount on your first month. However, in 1966, a fresh-faced Ceausescu met Kim Il-sung, the leader of North Korea, at a Comic-Con summit. No, not the Comic-Con with nerds dressed in spandex and overpriced figurines, but the Council for Mutual Economic Assistance, the Soviet Union's Eastern Bloc and socialist state response to Western Europe's Marshall Plan. How well the two leaders hit it off then, we don't know, but 5 years later in 1971, Ceausescu embarked on a tour of Romania's communist allies in East Asia, including China, Mongolia, North Vietnam, and North Korea. This meeting between the two leaders, however, would be far different than the one from 5 years before. At that time, Ceausescu had quite a good relationship with the West, and so Kim really wanted to get on his good side in the hopes that Ceausescu could facilitate a working relationship between North Korea and the USA. So Kim went all out, spending approximately a year preparing for Ceausescu's visit. Instead of working in the fields or factories, more or less the entire population of the capital, Pyongyang, rehearsed day and night for a full year for shows for Ceausescu's stay. Upon landing in Pyongyang, Ceausescu was greeted with the entire population of North Korean capital putting on a massive intricate performance of dancing in matching outfits while singing songs or reciting poetry written specifically for his visit. These crowds could be performing on the sides of the road while his motorcade would pass by, or in front of him at massive rallies in public squares, putting on jaw-dropping complicated displays of what I can only call synchronized sign dancing, or more personal performances at the constant lavish banquets and feasts. Kim Il-sung spared no expense in showing Ceausescu the ultimate communist dystopian hospitality. The entire capital of Pyongyang had been decorated with bright, colorful, and elaborate decorations and billboards celebrating the wonderful future guaranteed by a strong and beautiful friendship bound by the communist ideals between North Korea and Romania. Ceausescu never had to go 1 second of his day in the paradise of Pyongyang without either seeing or hearing effusive celebrations, cheering, dancing, or chanting in his honor. There even was a special song written just for his visit. Until now, the historical relationship between the two states quite frankly wasn't especially meaty, so the lyrics settled on just repeating how great the leaders were. Absolute lyrical genius. When Ceausescu took in all the mass choreography, the unbelievable displays of color, all done for him, in his honor, he saw something truly beautiful. The power of a leader to absolutely control and mobilize the population as a tool to instill national pride at the snap of his fingers. He couldn't get enough of the non-stop exuberant public adulation, the effusive and non-stop praise of his leadership, and the adoring public who would burst into tears of sheer joy at the sight of him. He took in how the North Korean people so adored their dear leader, and how Kim Il-sung was inseparable from the state of North Korea, and vice versa. He was the state personified. Kim wasn't just a politician or a mere leader of North Korea. He was the North Korean people's father, mother, family, and uncle that knew to get a wee bit too close. Kim was the people's god in a slightly obese form. From that point on, it was clear to Ceausescu that upon his return to Romania, there was gonna have to be some changes. Big changes. After coming back from Pyongyang, Ceausescu had found his destiny to rebuild Romanian society into a model communist utopia he saw in North Korea. While seeing Mao's China left him similarly astounded, with Kim Il-sung he found a very personal connection, and from here on the two began an earnest correspondence that would last for years. But just being pen pals wasn't enough for Ceausescu. He craved a much closer and deeper connection with Kim, and he had far greater plans. He was especially intrigued in replicating Kim's philosophy of Juche, the North Korean political philosophy of sovereignty and self-reliance at any cost, while giving the middle finger to such pesky nuisances like human rights, due process, or functioning independent civil institutions. I mean, really, who needs any of those? Ceausescu loved Juche so much, he quickly had the official North Korean booklet on it translated into Romanian and rapidly distributed copies throughout the country. A few weeks after his return from North Korea, Ceausescu then gave a speech before the Communist Party commonly referred to as the July Thesis, in which he outlined his future plan for Romania, directly influenced by Juche. While at the time Romania certainly couldn't be called a free and open society, the proposals in his speech put an end to any and all sort of liberalization or relaxation of the state's ideology from the 60s. In fact, it did the exact opposite and turned Romania 180 degrees in the opposite direction. From now on, just like in Juche, North Korea, the state party was in charge of all political and cultural activities, including the education curriculum in all schools and universities. All lessons of any kind now had to follow a strict party adherence, and all education was now to be intensely ideological. Teachers who were suspected of not adhering to the party line were to be replaced with party loyalists. In addition to educational reform, radio, television, the press, and publishing were also now required to contribute ideological education. From now on, just like in Juche, anything artistic such as televised music, ballet, paintings, theaters, opera, etc. must now be revolutionary in nature and contribute to socialist values. As such, media and entertainment in Romania were modified so that from that point on they would somehow relay the ideas of love for the state, nationalism, and gratitude to the supreme leader. The end goal was cultural and political isolationism in the name of protecting the nation from foreign influence and contamination. Ceausescu was particularly also enamored with Juche's philosophy of economic self-reliance at all costs. The Romanian economy was now to be reshaped to emphasize industrialization without dependence on foreign aid or trade. To immediately assist with this, from now on, able-bodied workers, students, and youth would now be mobilized into brigades of voluntary labor to work on large reconstruction projects or agricultural projects as part of obligatory patriotic work, which of course was to be done without pay, as serving the country and leader was a reward in itself. So Rishi Sunak, if you're watching, take notes. The change Ceausescu was most excited to implement, however, was replicating Kim Il-sung's cult of personality for himself and his wife. And throughout the 70s and 80s, Ceausescu was busy cultivating a relentlessly adoring cult of personality. He took great pains to replicate what he saw in North Korea as closely as possible, and directly copied many aspects, such as children as early as possible would learn and sing songs that praised the leader and the party. The leader was to be considered infallible, and as such, any criticism of the leader was impossible and would be punished harshly, with informers and secret police disappearing people who would challenge this policy. The state media would also relentlessly broadcast that the leader was a genius from humble backgrounds who worked his way to the top through his superhuman efforts to become the most important hero in their nation's history. His genius literary contributions to communist political thought were often published at regular intervals multiple times a year, and these collected thoughts were the basis for the country's greatness. In addition to Nicolae and Elena Ceausescu writing dozens of their own works each year, many volumes of praise to them were published annually. The public press was mandated to describe them with such words as geniuses, miracles, morning stars, saviors, sons, secular gods, titans, or even demigods. All extremely humble indeed. And with that, Ceausescu gained the title of the genius of the Carpathians. Day and night, the state produced never-ending streams of works of art made to praise and offer gratitude to the leaders via hymns, odes, songs, dances, paintings, sculptures, poetry, and prose. Throughout Romanian cities, from the hills and mountains of Transylvania to the plain breadbaskets of Wallachia, and amongst the alcoholics lying in the streets of Vaslui, signs and billboards of praise and thanks to the leader were found everywhere. Ceausescu's portrait was omnipresent in both public and private places, and no matter where you went, the genius of the Carpathians' gaze followed. Similarly to North Korea, Romania too constructed entire fake villages or fully stocked stores for foreign visitors, or just the leaders themselves' visits, where the residents were actors who praised the dear leader for blessing them with such great and bountiful lives, while actual stores were not so great. Wherever the leader went, the people had to show their adoration and affection by cheering, shouting, and crying with joy. preferably with large colorful signs or posters declaring their love for the dear leader and their genius benevolent policies, such as outlawing typewriters, taxing those empty egg carton women who couldn't conceive a child, and putting the people on a diet lowering their calories by 15% to save up money to pay off the international debt. Parades and our massive public spectacles were also routine, and they would have to be rehearsed months in advance, thus pulling chunks of the population for months at a time to rehearse intricate choreography set to music, instead of, doing their studies or working to earn their salary or produce actual products that would help out the rapidly declining country. Not that the products were of great quality either way, but it's the principle that counts. Another one of Ceausescu's big dreams was to construct his own Pyongyang-inspired construction vanity projects. The devastating Vrancea earthquake in March 1977 came at just the right time, which he then used as pretext to bulldoze 5 kilometers of Bucharest's beautiful historic old town and displace tens of thousands of people. And so, for the next couple of years, Project Bucharest was officially put into motion, with the final vision being to reconstruct the capital as a replica of Pyongyang. Because the old neoclassical Baroque and Art Nouveau that gave the city the title of Paris of the East were way too bourgeoisie, and the grand brutalist blocks that would give Bucharest the title Pyongyang of the West were much more in the style by the people and for the people. And with the start of the project, throughout Romania, countless amounts of beautiful and historic architecture were to be demolished. The culmination of this project also resulted with the construction of the most expensive administration building of all time, the Palace of the People, or Parliament, which was directly inspired by Kim's Kumsusan Palace and cost approximately 3 billion euros to build. Ultimately, Ceausescu worked hard to model his reign off the Kims in North Korea, with the ultimate goal that he was the state, that there was no Romania without Ceausescu and no Ceausescu without Romania. Because nothing screams classless, stateless society like acting as a 17th century French king. And for quite some time, he seemed to be succeeding at his mission. Throughout the 70s and 80s, the correspondence between the two leaders kept growing, with Kim noting approvingly the changes being made to Romanian society. The few letters we've been able to obtain that were sent between the two dictators show warm sentiments between comrades, with each constantly congratulating the other on meeting such socialist milestones such as increasing steel production or increasing the percentage of the party compromising workers and peasants, similarly to two nerds playing Victoria 3. Ceausescu so adored his time in North Korea that he was able to revisit again in 1978, 1982, and 1988. Each time he was greeted with a welcome worthy of a king that consisted of more song, dance, and choreographed performances. Even when Ceausescu wasn't visiting Pyongyang personally, he'd sent party officials in his place, and the relationship even became close enough that while we don't know exactly what they were saying to each other, we do know that their militaries trusted each other enough to share secrets and cooperate. Memos and letters unearthed from this time period show Ceausescu and Kim's insistence in the belief in the importance of their cooperation for the good of world peace. Because there's no force in the world that can stop two middle-sized impoverished dictatorships on separate parts of the globe. Nevertheless, Kim did his best to return some of the love, revisiting Romania personally in 1975 and in 1980. Ceausescu did the best to return the hospitality that had changed his life in 1971. Each time, there were exuberant and colorful displays of dancing, parades, and performances for Kim, attending by hundreds of thousands in the capital of Bucharest. Kim approved of the dramatic changes to Romanian society and marveled at the wonderful achievements obtained by the Romanian people under the leadership of Comrade Ceausescu in the struggle dedicated to building a multilaterally developed socialist society. Kim's visits weren't only to hang out. He was also there to mark the increasing medical, scientific, and military collaboration between the two throughout the 70s and 80s. Romanian universities even hosted North Korean exchange students who came via government exchanges and special scholarships to learn engineering, medicine, and the sciences, who would then return to North Korea to implement what they learned. The students would also come for cultural exchanges to learn about Romanian communism. Normally, Pyongyang did everything they could to prevent its citizens from being exposed to foreign influence. But this exchange in particular was allowed because Ceausescu's particular brand of socialist ideology had been so directly influenced by North Korean political thought. Teenage girls on Twitter that protect the honor of BTS and Jinbop with the onslaught of death threats for the mere meme of their favorite industry plant band have nothing on Ceausescu. My man was the original K-pop stan. Despite Ceausescu himself being pleased as a partridge at the development of his own personal dystopian communist fiefdom, shockingly enough, the Romanian people themselves didn't return the sentiment. Years of this Romanian juche of relentless economic self-reliance at the expense of the standard of living of its people had ground the economy into dust. After literally decades of the Ceausescus warping the state into their own personal vanity project, and decades of oppression, censorship, deprivation, totalitarian rule, relentless forced nationalism, economic mismanagement, and literal starvation, the Romanian people finally had enough and rose up against their oppressor during the Romanian Revolution in 1989 and disposed the Ceausescu via execution live on television on Christmas Day. As to what Kim personally thought of seeing his friend become a piece of Swiss cheese on live TV, we'll never know, seeing as North Korea was and still remains the most secretive and isolated country in the world, that for some reason autists on the left like to hyperfixate on and chill for on Twitter. F you, I'm never calling it X Elon, and North Korea sucks. There's no conspiracy by the US, it's not some secret Wakanda. Touch some grass for the love of God. Well, it's possible he mourned his friend. Self-reliance at all costs means that you must be realistic. And so perhaps he just moved on and hoped for continuing cooperation with Romania's next leader, Ion Iliescu. Alas, it was all to naught, as Romania promptly aligned itself to a decidedly pro-Western stance, which it has kept up to this day. Life expectancy go BAM! Ce fost Ceausescule? Unde s-a dus ciuceul tău? Țăranule borât! Nowadays, relations between the two are far from their previous closeness. Bilateral cooperation of any kind and diplomatic formalities remain limited to practically non-existent. While the North Korean embassy technically still exists in Bucharest, they ignored me when I emailed them to ask if they'd host my birthday party there, so I'm not sure how active they really are. All in all, the relationship between North Korea and Romania is one that remains as one of the oddest relationships between two countries in recent history. I hope you enjoyed learning more about one of the more peculiar Cold War friendships between two of the most infamous communist leaders ever seen. If you did, give this video a like and subscribe, or better yet, become a member like these wonderful people. My name is Janos and you've watched Living Ironically in Europe.